Hi, everybody. Hi, Miss Kim. um, welcome back. We are very excited because we had some awesome feedback about one of our episodes. I'm just pulling it up here because I did not have it prepared as usual. I just read it too. About episode 4, which was our barriers to entry in yoga. And someone commented, and this is their comment. They said, I absolutely loved this episode. As someone who is not heavily involved in the yoga world, this episode definitely helps to make more of the information easier to take in. Thank you both so much for sharing. This person also happens to be one of my friends. She did message me privately as well and just kind of expanded on that message and said, some of the information in yoga is hard to fully digest because she doesn't know the terminology and whatnot. So episode 4 and episode 5, what in episode 5 is what is yoga, kind of made it more easy to understand for someone like her who doesn't know all the yoga things. So today we are going to talk about, like, how would I phrase this in a question? Is it important? I don't know about important. I don't know about that word. Is it crucial or necessary for beginners to go into a class and understand it all? And I want to scale this down a little bit to narrow it down to classes that are like Ashtanga, where there is chanting, where there is mantra, where Sanskrit might be used, where it's not all in English, or even geared towards, some classes are geared towards the fitness crew, which is whatever it is, right? So not to be polarized, but does that make sense? That question?
Is it necessary to know all the lingo of yoga in order to attend a class?
On the first try, or, like, has there been some expectation set that you have to embody everything in the first class or the first 5 classes, right? These things.
Well, that's a loaded question, but it's got a lot of opportunity for it, right? So it's going to be a lifetime of understanding ourselves and life and society to say that I understand anything. And also, if I understand something the very first time I try it or see it, it either just becomes a part of my life or it doesn't capture my attention. I think that there's a lot of classes available for beginners out there where they can just feel into their body. So I think there is a lot of opportunity for people to at least enter a room or try yoga. But I think it goes back to the conversation of episode 5, and especially with the experience that I've been having with some private clients who are literally beginners and feel like your friend, like we went over one of their videos last week. And so they have these at home beginners yoga videos with Rodney Yee and all Sean Korn and all these really pioneers of American yoga. And they said, and that's how it got me in the door to begin with. They're like, we don't understand these yoga videos. I can't connect. It didn't capture my attention. And I was like, oh, okay, let me, so we started doing work together, but it wasn't until last Friday that I went to their house and watched the videos with them. And they were absolutely right. The dialogue was like a disassociated, like the tone of the voice didn't really like go with the video. The video was a little too slow and the cues didn't really match. Or like in another video, we watched a few, the practitioner was extremely flexible and he skipped all the steps for somebody else that's not flexible to actually take the position. He was showing in the beginning yoga class a full entire stretch that honestly, like, not a lot of people can take cold, right? But because he had been a lifelong practitioner or had open, flexible joints, he was able to get to these postures. So we had a nice long conversation about it. I was like, wow, you were really right. Like, maybe I need to make a beginner yoga class. Maybe I need to dialogue and take some of the misconceptions or the just break down the fear, break it down a little bit. So on one hand, yes, you can go into a class and have an experience. You don't necessarily need to know all the words. Just breaking the barrier to entry and going in is big enough, right? And then also you get the benefit of connecting with the teacher, or you don't, right? But what your hope is, and what my hope is that if you go into a yoga class and you don't connect with the teacher and it feels foreign to you, that you don't give up. Okay, because in our society, it's like a drive-through. Well, I tried that once and I didn't like it, so I'm done. I'm going to formulate a judgment, and I'm actually going to keep my life experience in the same size, shape, container that it's in. Or we can, take heed or listen to podcasts like this and try it again and find the right teacher. And especially in America, where the English language is spoken in all other countries. So of course, I believe it seems pretty natural for an American person to say, hey, I don't understand this Indian concept because they're using words I don't understand. But if we can just take ourselves outside of being American and Anglo speaking English person, the rest of the world has had to deal with that I don't understand what America is saying. I don't understand their words. Oh, I have to learn them in order to understand. We're not saying, you and I, that they need to learn Sanskrit or know the words, but someone at least needs to take that away from the podcast today, that if you're struggling in America understanding yoga and you are triggered or you feel like you can't connect to the words, well, that's a beautiful place to actually start and recognize, like, the rest of the world has had to learn our language and we're just used to people speaking our language. So it's a weird thing, or we think that like it's not necessary or it's not for us because we might have to leave our sort of superpower language. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because that's the part that really what I would like to share in this podcast is that, yeah, if you're feeling like you don't understand, like, that's okay, but does that mean that you turn around and never go back again? I don't know. What did you get out of the class? Or were you in your head and your ego so much that you couldn't take in anything outside of things that were in your comfort level, right? So we've always said that the moment you want to jump out of the posture is when the true experience and teaching or a revelation you'll have within yoga begins. So I encourage that person or the beginning yoga to not give up, to keep trying, to recognize that these words, you say taco, you say gracias, you say agua, you say amor, you say Dia de los Muertos in California, right? Because we're California kids. So that's what I see that is. It's just like, oh, you're not aware of how the Mexican or Latino culture is already existent in our English speaking world. So, namaste, yoga, those words just naturally become something that you're comfortable with rather than something that repels you. Right?
Yeah. Two things happened in my mind when you were saying all this. And the first, it's like, I would say understand for beginners, there is no expectation for you to embody, to understand, to be able to fully appreciate whatever that you want to put, whatever you're expecting. There's no expectation to do all this stuff. It took me years to chant a mantra like correctly. It's like saying the words properly in Sanskrit, right? It took me a long time. And when I'd sit in your class, Kim, I would try to sit as close as I could to you to hear the enunciation, I was still saying it wrong until we got together privately and you taught me these things, you know? So you also mentioned, along that same note, you also mentioned in a conversation before this, is that like it's a process. It takes years to embody, to learn, to understand for yourself these concepts of yoga, the physical practice of yoga. That's why it's a practice. That's why it's not just something you go do and get right. Like if it was something that you understood, embodying all these things in the first class, there would be no industry. There would be no reason for yoga teachers. So that's like the first thing. And then the second thing is a grander idea, which I just love, is already there is this idea in our conversation that we're opening up to, that is patience and compassion and understanding and seeing things outside our own scope. So not only are we speaking to beginners about their own experience and releasing expectations, just being in the moment, being present, being willing, giving themselves kudos for just getting in the door and then taking what did stick and going back for what didn't or whatever. But now we get to have this conversation to beginners, to intermediates, to advanced practitioner, whatever. What an awesome opportunity we have to realize and have compassion for the rest of the world, right? That our experience, like yoga is an opportunity to learn about another culture, to learn another language, to learn another philosophy. And it's optional. English speaking countries had to get on board, right? Theoretically, I'm not sure, but I mean, it is amazing because yoga is about opening ourselves up to ourselves, but in a way creates this community where we get to all kind of struggle. We're using a lot of quotes, but like, you know, loosely, we all get to learn together. That's a better way to put it. And call upon our teachers, our guides, our mentors, our peers to help embody this practice in this culture and maybe even have a bit more appreciation for it as well. And then for those who have been to India, who've practiced in ashrams and have practiced with, you know, gurus of past and gurus of now, you know, really see just the other side of what yoga is and can be. And I think that's really cool. I think that's really cool. You know, we get out of this kind of narrow scope that we find ourselves in nationally, but also I think individually. And I think too, I think this all ties in, goes back to me for words. It all goes back to the point of there's no expectations to get it right or to understand. That's not the point. Mm-hmm. And it is uncomfortable not knowing the words. The first time I heard a Sanskrit word for a posture in a yoga class, I looked up and I was like, what am I doing? I have no idea. Virabhadrasana 1. And then the teacher was like, Warrior 1. And I'm like, oh, okay, but why would you say it in a different language? And then all the judgments creeped in, like, oh, I should know more than I do. I should have known that. That was really uncomfortable for me. I had to look up. I had to ask a mental question, you know, like it's not easy. But then I have to question myself. What are my expectations of myself in this practice, you know?
Yeah. And I feel like as you've been talking, like that, you know, when they go, oh, it's nothing but love and fear. I'm like, oh God, here we go. But if you take the judgment, if you take the, oh, they said a word I can't relate, if you take the I'm not flexible enough, if you take the I can't wear those pants, whatever it is, it's fear. If you boil it down, you really look at the resistance or the hesitation, right? You had some fear when you didn't want to straighten your knees out and down or face. Like, it's basically, you can boil it down to fear. And then what you're saying on the other side is these expectations, there's no expectation, there's just have an experience. That's love.
Yeah.
That's compassion. If we heat it up or, you know, boil it down, it becomes these polarities, right? So you have a positive, you have a negative, and then you have the neutral. Well, that's in the atom as well. The subatomic particle, you have a neutron, a proton, and an electron. So we're looking at like, we're backing this way down for the beginning yoga student. We all can agree that there's a positive, there's a negative, and a neutral. And as the person vacillates in between fear, negative, okay, I can do this, positive, okay, I just had an experience and I did that. This is what we're talking about. It really gets boiled down to, and I'll add on what you just said. You're like, oh, I'm automatically in my head and forming a judgment or whatever that is in there. I think we started the podcast with the first sutra, like, welcome to yoga. Yeah. And so there you are, you're in the moment, you're in this welcoming place, whether you're in fear or love or resistance or judgment, whatever, or neutrality, but you're there, welcome, you made it. And what's the next sutra? What's the next philosophical gem? Yoga is the cessation of the thought forms in our mind. Welcome, you made it, and get ready to watch yourself vacillate up here with everything. So that's so juicy, right? So even a beginner yoga student can intellectually talk about this concept with us, right? And then the rest of it's going to be about them letting go of all the things that stand in the way of them being in positive, negative, and neutral. Yeah. In any experience, including yoga.
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, some of my hardest yoga classes have been when I've taken a natural vinyasa class and the teacher with her daisy voice and her perfect, I'm just over there projecting judgments and thoughts. Like even onto that, those are some really hard classes for me, right? And that's where I go, gosh, beginner or advanced, we all spiral around it all the time, our whole lives, every day. And we get more advanced at sticking, oh, we can hang longer in a polarity of positivity or neutrality. And that's when we begin to build the bandwidth of our practice or our life or our connection to yoga or wherever we're headed and what yoga serves us for.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think one other thing that came up too is it is a practice and we get to be in the moment. We get to look at our thought forms. But one thing that did come up for me is with the expectations and the judgments. And I'm forming this thought as I'm saying these too. The first thing that popped up is it's okay to ask questions, right? I think that's, which we are not taught that it's okay to ask questions in this society. Like you're going to go to school and you have to know it. And if you ask questions or if you're called upon and you don't know the answer, your peers are going to chuckle, ha ha, she doesn't know. That's not what we're here for. That's not what yoga is here for, right? You get to explore everything about you. And questions are supposed to come up, aren't they? Like how many talks have you and I had just in our own private sessions or after a yoga class, where I'm asking questions or you're asking questions back to me or whatever it is, right? That's the point, is being a little curious about what's going on. And if we approach it from a curious place, from a place where we allow ourselves to ask those internal questions or external questions, doesn't that in some way take the judgments, at least the self-judgment away, right? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't know. And the ideal would be that, beginners or whomever, right? Because this is geared towards beginners, but it's also conversation for experienced practitioners too. The ideal would be is you have a yoga class that you go to and you can ask these questions. You can be allowed to not understand, to have a hard time digesting, to be in and out of your mind. And it's a safe container to do so, right? And that just takes me, I remember the very first yoga class I taught in Redding, California at a gym. And excuse me. There was a woman who I was doing like a down dog, lift your leg up in the air. She's like, is my hip supposed to be open or is it supposed to be down? And I had no yoga training. Like I had no training to teach. That's just how cool Redding, California is, and gyms are. You can just go and be like, hey, I do yoga, let me teach for you, right? And I just remember being like, so she asked a question. I was a little frustrated because it was in the middle of class. I was a little frustrated because I didn't know how to answer her, because it caused me to reflect, like, well, what is the point of what I'm doing? And then I'm like, oh, this is just what I've seen in so many videos. Like, no one explained it to me, you know?
That's where I feel like my clients were like, I don't know how to use this video. And the practitioner was just moving along without like saying, like, it was like supposed to, it's almost like you could shut your eyes and not do any of the yoga and like go through a guided meditation kind of a class. It wasn't beginners yoga where they say, hey, you must be feeling pretty uncomfortable. No, it was like this, it was like a Disney movie kind of a yoga, you know. It was still sort of magical and Lululemon-y and like, ooh, her shirt matched the ocean kind of a thing, and all, you know what I mean? She had the right outfit on that matches, but it wasn't like, let's talk about the philosophy of yoga and really get down to business here, where we can like make magic in one class.
Right. Right. And I think that's a hard feat to do sometimes because everybody is so different. You know, I mean, it turned out, this yoga student was a teacher. She was attending other teachers' classes for whatever reason. A lot of whatever, there's a whole story around her specifically, but it caused me as an instructor. That was probably my very first lesson in teaching yoga is know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and be able to convey that to students so they know why they're doing that. And then secondly, just she interrupted the whole freaking class and asked the question. And but then in the past, that just was so jarring to me as a teacher, and then later on when I was taking more classes as a student. But now it's just like I admire it so much because that's the question I was asking myself. Like, am I supposed to be doing this, And so another thing for, people who are just stepping into the door of yoga is you have a question, chances are the people around you have questions. You're not dumb because you don't get it or whatever it is. It's built that way. The system is built that way in yoga because it's a long life embodiment process. But like, ask your questions. It's fine. Some teachers want you to wait till after class. Some teachers don't mind if you ask in the middle of class, and just ask them and know that you're not alone, right? Even though this is our own practice for our own enlightenment, we are all experiencing it kind of together in a way.
Yeah, and I guess the part of it is like, well, what should the beginner yoga student look for in a class? You know, it's like, what are you looking for, right? The word that comes up for me is like safety and agency. So like, I want to feel safe in a class, meaning like, there's kindness, whatever safe means to you, kindness, a teacher, a good vibe. Do you need what? I don't know what you need to feel safe, but I know that I need to feel safe. Even as an advanced practitioner, if the person isn't cueing me into a posture right, I know better. But it's like when somebody can trick me into a posture I never thought I could make, that's a good teacher, right? So safe is one word that I look for in a yoga class. What would you look for as a beginning yoga person? Like, are you looking for a good like a teacher that will look you in the eye? Like, what would make you feel?
I think You said safety and agency, and I think I
Oh,
would,
agency, that's
yeah, that's
right.
the other thing.
Agency, hold on. Okay, so agency, what I meant by that, and safety, meaning like when I walk into a yoga class and nobody says hello to me, like sometimes in those Mysore rooms, there's so much shadow ego. There is. Even the lady that, or the person that's running the room can have like an attitude. I'm like, oh, here we go. We'll see, right? But the agency is like saying like, the teacher knows that every body is different. So what you said, like, why are we teaching the posture? Are there steps, or are they just peacocking and doing the most advanced posture where you're left over there watching them the whole time, right? So I want that teacher to give me agency over my body. Hey, sink into your sit bones. Touch your front of your chest. This is your sternum. Lift it. Take your fingers and lift it. So getting in touch with like, I tried a yoga class and the teacher didn't do anything but play great beats, but I didn't really learn anything and now my back hurts. Okay, try another class. You know, oh, that teacher was great because actually she taught me about, oh, this is the humerus bone. Oh, I didn't know that. Did you know that you can extra, you know what I mean? So we want to be looking for like ways that we walk away and we're like, oh, I had an experience, right? So that's what I mean by agency and safety.
Yeah, I would say that what I look for, like what I look for when I go into a class for the first time, because every time I take a new class, I'm a beginner again, which is how I view it, right? I would say pretty much the same thing, safety and agency. But what that means to me, I think one word, or one sentence or phrase that could really sum that up is someone who can guide me through my practice. And guiding me means I want to be taken care of, man. I want to be held. If I'm crying because my legs are straight in a down dog and all my emotional stuff is coming out, I want someone who can read me and know kind of what I need intuitively. And that's a practice of itself. Not every teacher, that's a high expectation from a yoga teacher, from many yoga teachers. I specifically go to yoga teachers now and I say, I want the adjustments. Let's go. They're like, do you want gentle, kind adjustments or alignment adjustments? And I say both, because I know that I respond well and I learn well through physical touch. When instructors straighten my legs and give me a little blurb about it, right? Jesse, you'll get there. You can do this. It's your emotional being that's holding you back, or it's the shadow there for you. Because our teachers can see stuff that I can't, right? When I thought my back was straight and like a half lift, I was rounding my thoracic spine, like the top part of my spine. And I've had to have people like you help me align that and be like, there you go. This is going to take years. Also, set my expectations. I might have it down today, but the next class, if I don't have that adjustment, that's not going to be there. It'll be in my brain, but it won't translate physically. So I want someone who can eventually get to know me. And before they know me, my body and what it needs, just really be there for my experience and guide me through it. Whether it's just standing next to me and breathing with me or handing me a tissue. And that's kind of it. And so it goes hand in hand, safety and agency, and someone who can guide me through my practice with both those things. And I think the other biggest thing, which is really important, I think has become more important recently, is the ability, as an instructor, and this goes with agency and safety, is the ability for me to say no. Whether that's through physical communication or verbal. Like you've adjusted me in class into like freaking binds and stuff, and I'm sitting there shaking, right? I could say no. You'd be like, all right, back off the edge. And you and I both know what that no would mean for me, right? Like I'm a little scared,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But there,
What's,
but but there's being able to say no
and
is really important.
if there's fear there, right? So there's so much that we can go in so many directions, but it is important to be, this is why we're creating community here, because we need to get to know each other, right? It's you don't just take one yoga class in every town and then keep moving as a beginner. You make a relationship with someone, and it is about learning, and it is a lifelong journey. But I also want to say and encourage anyone watching this video to really not be brave, but be willing to say, well, I listened to that podcast. I've learned a few things. I'm going to go out and experience a little bit of what they're talking about without making the judgment. Because like I said, right, we were talking at the beginning of class. I mean, this podcast, it was like people, we're an English speaking country and English is spoken throughout the world. And so when we see things that we don't understand in our language, we will, we reject it because we don't understand it, because actually we are unconscious and we don't understand that maybe it's the ego that's saying, well, it needs to be the American way all the time. And this particular offering to the world was an offering from India. So as we embrace the offering, we also embrace the culture, the way that the whole entire world has had to embrace Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and all the things that have been shoved into the jungles, you know what I mean, of these indigenous, which I've seen in my travels, right? But I also want to say, I encourage people to get a little messy. Yeah, get uncomfortable, because we're talking about it. We have an avenue to come to a podcast and say, yeah, I got a little messy. Oh, it has to do with my fear or my judgment or whatever. But this is the community that we're trying to create so that people will get in there and get a little messy, because a rising tide will lift all ships. And when we work on ourselves, we work on the world. And it's not always linear, as we know through life. It's very, all kinds of directions, but still, to encourage someone to not give up or not give in to the fear or give up after one session because it didn't hit them the way like the movie on a Friday night did or something. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of that is disassociation. We're able to disassociate from our life. Yoga is actually asking us to get in there, which can be really uncomfortable.
I feel like that's a good place to stop and ask some questions. I have a couple questions to our community out there. One, as beginners or in any way, in any part of yoga, is there something that we can talk about that could help you understand something that you don't know? Like, share with us. Let us know your experiences as a beginner, maybe something that you would like talked about on this podcast. And then secondly, I just lost it. It was about
questions, comments, what you want to know.
What you want to know. And then something along the lines, like maybe if you have an experience you want to share about your first time being a beginner, if you're still a beginner or an intermediate or advanced practitioner, whatever, an experienced practitioner, like what have been your experiences? What do you want to see in a class when you first step into the studio?
There you go.
For the first time. That's what it was. That's what it was.
What would a beginner want to see or imagine seeing in their first beginner yoga class? And then we can talk about that.
I would love to. So let us know. You can email us at practitionerstable@gmail.com or in the comments below.
And I also think, Jesse, it might be a little precursor into moving into Sutra number 2. So we can say, welcome. Also, let's really look at the contents of our mind and keep kind of returning back to that simplicity so we can look at this fear, negativity versus love, positivity, and the neutral space in between, and how all beings come from positive and negative and neutral electrons, protons, and neutrons. So it's kind of very parallel.
Don't give away too much, because next episode. So awesome.
Yeah.
Kim, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being here and exploring this with me. Thanks for those who do comment on our videos. And for those who don't, let's go. We want to hear from you. Let's build this community. So have a great day. Have a good week. And we'll see you next time.
Yes. Thank you.
Of course. Bye.
Bye.